You think emotional intelligence is visible in calm voices, thoughtful advice, and people who always say the right thing. But the most emotionally intelligent person in the room is often the one doing something so subtle you barely notice it. And once you see it, you'll start noticing how rarely it actually happens. Because most people don't lack empathy. They lack the one habit that reveals whether their nervous system is actually capable of handling other people's emotions without defending itself. And there's a reason this habit feels so unnatural to most people, a reason rooted deep in how the brain protects identity. The strange part is that this habit looks almost passive from the outside. It doesn't involve impressive words, perfect insight, or emotional speeches. It looks like a pause. A moment of stillness, a quiet delay before someone reacts. But that pause is not silence, it's regulation. Inside that moment, something very specific is happening in the nervous system. The brain's threat perception circuitry, the same system designed to detect danger, is being interrupted before it launches a defensive reaction. When someone criticizes you, misunderstands you, or expresses anger, your nervous system doesn't treat that as neutral information. It treats it as a social threat. Your identity preservation bias activates instantly, pushing you to protect your self-image, to defend, to explain, to counterattack. Most people react in under half a second. Emotionally intelligent people don't. They pause. Not because they're polite, because their nervous system has learned something rare. Emotional information is not the same thing as danger. This is the habit, and it reveals far more about a person than anything they say afterward. Psychologist Daniel Goleman, whose research popularized the concept of emotional intelligence, described one of its core components as emotional regulation, the ability to interrupt impulsive reactions long enough for the thinking brain to stay online. When this doesn't happen, the amygdala hijacks the system, and the person reacts before they understand what they're reacting to. That pause you sometimes see in emotionally intelligent people, that's the brain refusing the hijack. But here's the uncomfortable part. Most people believe they pause. In reality, they delay their reaction by just enough time to deliver a more sophisticated defense. It looks controlled, it sounds reasonable, but it's still protection. True emotional intelligence reveals itself in a different way. When someone pauses, listens, and allows another person's emotional experience to exist without immediately correcting it, reframing it, or explaining it away, that's not politeness. That's nervous system stability. Think of it like a shock absorber in a vehicle. When a car without suspension hits a bump, the impact transfers directly to the frame. Everything rattles. Everything reacts. But a car with strong suspension absorbs the impact before it spreads through the system. Emotionally intelligent people have built that suspension internally. They absorb emotional impact before responding. Most people don't realize how rare this is, because what usually happens in conversation is something psychologists call the avoidance reinforcement loop. When uncomfortable emotions appear, criticism, disappointment, anger, the brain quickly searches for ways to neutralize the discomfort, explaining yourself, changing the topic, offering solutions too quickly, minimizing the other person's feelings. All of these behaviors feel helpful, but they are actually avoidance mechanisms. And the brain learns something dangerous when we do this repeatedly. Emotional discomfort must be escaped as fast as possible. This is where it turns. The person who cannot pause becomes trapped in a pattern where every emotional interaction triggers protection. You see it in subtle ways. Someone interrupts before you finish explaining. Someone immediately tells you why you're wrong. Someone rushes to fix a problem before fully hearing it. From the outside, these reactions look engaged. Inside the nervous system, they are defensive maneuvers. Because allowing someone else's emotion to fully exist, even for 10 seconds, can feel threatening if your identity depends on being seen as right, good, helpful, or in control. And this is where the strange habit begins revealing something deeper.
Emotionally intelligent people are not simply better listeners, they are less afraid of emotional discomfort. When someone expresses frustration towards them, their brain doesn't instantly translate that into "I'm under attack." Their threat detection system stays quiet long enough to observe. What's actually being said? What emotion is underneath it? Is this about me or about their experience? That small internal delay changes everything. But here's the uncomfortable truth most people don't like hearing. If you feel an overwhelming urge to defend yourself quickly in conversations, your nervous system isn't protecting the truth, it's protecting your identity. And identity preservation is powerful. Humans evolved in social groups where rejection could mean isolation, and isolation once meant death. So the brain developed a deep sensitivity to social threat. Criticism can activate the same neural pathways as physical pain, which means that when someone questions you, disagrees with you, or expresses hurt, your nervous system may react as if survival itself is being challenged. That's why the pause feels so difficult. It feels unsafe. Emotionally intelligent people didn't eliminate this response, they retrained it. And that training usually comes from experience, often painful experience, where reacting quickly made things worse. They learned something most people avoid learning. Immediate defense destroys understanding. This is the part no one warns you about. The habit of pausing before reacting not only improves conversations, it exposes your relationship with your own emotions. Because when you stop reacting immediately, you're forced to feel the discomfort that reaction normally hides. The tension in your chest, the urge to interrupt, the fear of being misunderstood. And many people discover something unsettling in that moment. They aren't reacting to the other person. They're reacting to the feeling of losing control over how they are perceived. This is where the psychological mechanism becomes visible. Attachment theory, originally developed by John Bowlby, explains that our early relational experiences shape how safe emotional conflict feels in adulthood. People with secure attachment learned that emotional tension can exist without threatening the relationship itself. People without that safety experience emotional disagreement as relational danger, which means their brain rushes to repair or control the situation immediately. The pause interrupts that instinct. But most people never build the habit, because doing so requires tolerating a very specific discomfort, the temporary uncertainty of not defending yourself. And that uncertainty feels unbearable if your identity depends on always being understood correctly. Now we arrive at the deeper truth hiding inside this strange habit. The pause isn't about listening, it's about emotional tolerance. Emotionally intelligent people can tolerate the temporary discomfort of being misunderstood without rushing to repair their image. That's not politeness, that's nervous system stability. But this is also where the pattern becomes dangerous if it's missing, because people who cannot pause slowly damage their relationships without realizing it. Every quick defense sends a message, your emotions are a threat to me. Every interruption signals my identity matters more than your experience. Over time, people stop sharing openly with someone who reacts this way, not out of punishment, out of self-protection. Conversations become careful, shallow, filtered, and the person who reacts quickly often interprets this change completely wrong. They think people are distant. They think people are sensitive. They think communication is breaking down. But the real cause is simpler. Emotional safety never had room to exist. And that leads to a predictable outcome. If this pattern continues long enough, the person becomes surrounded by people who either avoid conflict entirely or leave the relationship altogether. Not because of cruelty, because emotional environments shape behavior. Now return to the question from the beginning. What is the strange habit that quietly reveals emotional intelligence? It's not saying the perfect thing. It's not reading people's emotions flawlessly. It's the ability to pause when your identity feels challenged and stay present long enough to understand what's actually happening. That pause tells you everything about a person's emotional architecture. It reveals whether their nervous system can handle emotional friction without turning the conversation into a battlefield. And once you start noticing it, you'll see something unsettling. Most people don't do it. Not consistently, not when it matters most. Which means emotional intelligence isn't primarily about knowledge, it's about tolerance. Tolerance for discomfort, misinterpretation, emotional tension. Because without that tolerance, every conversation eventually becomes a negotiation for self-protection. And that brings us back to the loop we opened earlier. Why does this habit feel so rare? Because it requires something most people spend their entire lives avoiding, letting go of the immediate need to protect how they are seen. And once you begin noticing that pattern in yourself and in others, you start seeing emotional intelligence very differently.